Okay, so welcome to the last session of our Decatur Book Festival 2025 at the First Baptist Stage. My name is Kelly Caudill. I am the stage captain here today. Just a couple of brief announcements. The authors will be signing books at the conclusion of this session. And I think you probably know the drill by now. They exit one way, you leave the sanctuary and meet them outside. We'll also have a Q&A at the end of the conversation. As you listen to the conversation, think of one concise question you would like to ask. Please make sure it's a question and not your life story or comment. Don't ask me how I know or what makes me say that. Please avoid, that. Just give everybody a chance to kind of get up and ask a question. We'd really appreciate it. And as you know, again, I mentioned the books are available for purchase. Eagle Eye is our bookseller. I hope that you know that a portion of each purchase you make here from these independent booksellers goes to support the festival. So you're not only helping the independent booksellers, but you're also helping support the festival. Excuse me. Decatur Book Festival is a nonprofit. It depends on sponsors and donations to bring great authors to Decatur each year. Please consider a tax-deductible donation to support the festival by going to its website. That's www.decaturbookfestival.com. Do we still say www? I mean, I don't know, maybe that's, just now occurs to me. I've said it like 4 times today. Lastly, please take a moment to ensure that your ringtones, your phones, or anything else that rings and buzzes is turned off, okay, for the benefit of your neighbors. Okay, now I would like to introduce our moderator and our authors today. We're very fortunate to have Ms. Tiphanie Yanique. She's the author of 2 novels, including Monster in the Middle, and a poetry collection and short story collection as well. She has won numerous prestigious awards, such as the Lambda Literary Prize, the Bocas Prize, the Pushcart Prize, and many others. Seated next to her is Phillippi Ryan. She is a USA Today bestselling author of 16 psychological thrillers, and she has won the most prestigious awards in the genre. Her newest novel is the cross-country cat and mouse chase, All This Could Be Yours. Is that right? People magazine calls it, quote, a nail-biting thriller. Looking forward to that one. And then at the end, we have Miss Elizabeth George. She's a New York Times bestselling author of 21 psychological suspense novels, 5 young adult novels, 2 books of nonfiction, and 2 short story collections. Her work has been honored with the Anthony and Agatha Awards, 2 Edgar nominations, and both France's and Germany's first prize for crime fiction. Please join me in giving them a warm welcome.
So excited to be here. Good evening, everyone. We are all here because we are slightly odd folks. We're weirdos who like the psychological, crazy stuff. So I am going to start off by asking a sort of psychologically thrilling question. And this first question actually is for Hank. But I think, just so you guys know, we'll be just chatting back and forth for a while here, and then we'll open it up to you guys for questions after. So, Hank, your book is about an author who, while on book tour, it's already getting freaky, realizes that she may have a stalker. And at some point in the book, deep in the book, I'm not going to give anything away, she starts to wonder if even maybe the person who her son is going to stay with at a play date, maybe the mom of his friend is that stalker. I just wondered if you could talk about what it means to be an author, writing about an author who is in danger, what what it might mean to be on book tour now, and like for a book about an author on book tour who's on danger. And as a mom, I also just wonder like what it might have been like to write a book, you're a mom, and where a mother is dealing with these fears.
You're so right about this. I'm an author on book tour with a book called All This Could Be Yours, which is about an author on book tour with a book called All This Could Be Yours. And you know, I've said that before and I laugh every time. But you're so wise because this book is super meta and super personal. I've also been a television reporter for 43 years, including 5 years at WSB, if any of you remember back in the early 80s. And I've wired myself with hidden cameras and confronted corrupt politicians and chased down criminals and gone undercover and in disguise and won 37 Emmys for investigative reporting. All the while knowing that if I walk into the grocery store or walk into a bookstore, that somebody would know who I am. And my entire career was being recognized, for better or for worse. Not only, and I promise you, this is apropos of your question, once my house was broken into, because the burglar knew that I was live broadcasting on television.
Oh, wow.
So he knew I wasn't home. So that vulnerability, that public knowledge of where I am and where I am not transfers to the life of Tessa Calloway, who is an instant best-selling author. She's a mom, she's a wife, she's decided to quit her job in the corporate world and follow her dreams to be an author. And by golly, she hits it big with her first book and gets sent on this massive, glamorous tour, which turns into a cross-country cat and mouse chase. And what makes it difficult is that she, following her dreams, getting everything that she thought she ever wanted, has to leave her family behind. So she is trying to be a mom and a wife via Zoom and via FaceTime, and she begins to realize that her husband is curating the videos that he's showing her from home. Why won't he show her the kids? Why won't he show her their new house? Why won't he show her the neighbors? And so while she's on book tour, and Elizabeth and I know this totally, she's starving, she's exhausted, she doesn't have any idea what city she's in, different hotel, different airport every day. She's torn between the responsibility of being an author and being a public figure and having the family's livelihood depend on her selling books, not to mention the bookstore, not to mention the publisher, while she's trying to be a mom at the same time, and she worries, is her newfound fame going to reveal the secret that will ruin her life, not only her life, but her family's life? And she cannot go home to find out. And that wrenching battle, that wrenching tension between trying to do your job in your career that you love and trying to protect your family back home when you have made them vulnerable. And that is a choice that she didn't realize she was having to make, and that you're so wise in that. That is one of the deep cores of the book. How do women balance following their passion in their career, but also be a good mom? And how do you keep a secret when your life is so public?
Yeah. Thank you for that beautiful, expansive answer. Weren't you scared to write a book like this, though?
Was I scared? You know, it's interesting. As a reporter, it's not like I'm a foreign correspondent, and those people are saints, and I just applaud them daily. But as a reporter, I've been threatened and stalked and followed and, sued and followed home and yelled at and, had people come up to me in the street and say, "You're Hank Phillippi Ryan, I hate you, you ruined my life." Because I've won 37 Emmys. Every one of those Emmy Awards represents a secret that someone didn't want me to tell you. A secret that I revealed. So that for all the laws that were changed and all the good that was done and all the people's homes I got out of foreclosure, it was for the greater good. And you make that decision to do something for the greater good. But I totally weaponized book tour in this book. I took everything possible that's great and wonderful and lovely that Elizabeth has, fans and signing and book sales and New York Times bestseller. Elizabeth has had it all. But also there's just that moment, and we'll share it today, when you say, does anybody have any questions? And we all wonder, is someone about to ask the one thing that we don't want you to ask? And I took everything about book tour and made it terrifying. So it creeps. I've had authors, this is my final thing, I've had author pals read this book and say they were happy they read it when they got home from book tour, because it just creeped them out so much.
I really hope that one of you is now thinking, what is that question?
I really hope you're not.
I love our vibe up here. This is great. Elizabeth, I have a question for you. I really do think that women writers write men very well. Frankly, I think men writers could learn a lot about how we do when they write about women. I think you do such a good job here with your characters. And just so that you guys know, Elizabeth's book goes back and forth between different point of views. And the male point of view is so well done, even though sometimes problematic. There's one moment where he calls his wife's friends her female companions, which is so gross. I was like, are those dogs, puppies? What do you mean female companions? So I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that process of writing from a male perspective. Like, how did you get the bravery to do that? Because that might be actually kind of scary to do also. And just like, let us know, what was that like? How did you get brave?
The character that Tiffany's talking about is actually the murder victim. So in this book, it's a dual narrative. And while you were talking, I realized I've done dual narratives 3 times, and twice there have been first-person male of the 3 times. Anyway, so the victim in the book gives nothing away to say. His name is Michael Lobb. He dies really quickly, so it's not like I've just given you a horrible spoiler, because I think he's dead within 10 pages of the book, he's killed quite violently. And shortly after his murder, the entire structure of the novel switches, and we now start his point of view. And so while you're reading the story of the investigation into this murder, you are also seeing from his point of view everything that led up to the murder. Writing his voice, I always create my characters in advance, so by the time I get them on paper, I know who they are, I know their background, I know their psychopathology, I know what kind of defensive maneuvers they make when they are under stress. So all that stuff is available to me. Now, I wanted this character, Michael Lobb, to be sort of a combination of delusional, contemptible, and obnoxious, really. But not so much that it just kind of drips off the page. I wanted him to be a man who doesn't really see what's going on around him, and who really is quite unable to put the relationship he has with this much younger woman into perspective. And in order to do that, I do these things that I call, my deep character bends, like deep knee bends. And what I'm trying to do is, in all of the writing, because I do third-person shifting viewpoint and then this first-person narrative. And what I'm trying to do is really get into the mind and the voice of that character before I actually put anything on the page. But it helps to have created all of them in advance. And I have a woman who reads my books when they're in the draft just before I send it to the publisher, and she will jot down little things in the margin as she's reading. And there was one point where she wrote on his narrative, "I can't stand this man," which is great. And that told me that, okay, great. It's working just the way I want it to work.
Thank you so much for giving us some pointers on how to do this well, too. To move to a character who's actually also a victim, I'm going to ask a question, Hank, about Tessa. And different than Elizabeth's victim, Tessa is repeatedly thought of as lucky, lovely, friendly, kind, loved.
This
and
is
yet,
just like the conversation we had.
Yes. And yet she is not safe because she's loved and kind. And I wonder if you could talk about the ways in which, maybe particularly women, where we are not always safe, that being kind and love is not always going to protect us. And I would actually love, Elizabeth, if you chimed in on this too, because we did have this conversation in the back. So yeah, what are your thoughts about that?
I mean, I think it's interesting. Can I ask Elizabeth something about your question, because I thought it was
Sure.
so wise. So when you think about writing from a male point of view, do you think about a male thing, or do you think about what is it that this person wants, and is there a maleness that you have to enter your brain since you're not, or is it just about the person?
For me, it's mostly about the person. I don't really worry, because I think you could absolutely end up paralyzing yourself by sitting there thinking, oh my God, I'm writing in the male perspective. Now, what would a man think? So I just, I don't worry about that. And then I can go back later and make corrections. But I think one thing that's really helpful is that my main character in the books is a man, but we don't hear from him in first person, and it does really help that he's a gentleman as well. So when I'm writing in the point of view of a British gentleman, he's going to have a very different attitude than the miner, the tin streamer, who is the guy who's the murder victim. Yeah,
It's interesting because I have a friend who wrote a novel, and she gave it to her beta reader, and the main character was a man, and her beta reader said, this main character doesn't seem like a man. You should make him be a woman. He's not acting like a man. And so my friend said, tell me what it is that you think is making him not be male. And the beta reader said, he's apologizing all the time.
That's great. That's excellent.
I feel like that's sad for both genders, you know?
Exactly.
Women apologizing too much, dudes not apologizing enough. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? Yeah, that was an excellent point.
It is an excellent point.
And it's so good that the reader, not only picked up on the fact that it didn't seem like a man, but also why it didn't seem like a man.
And so smart of her to ask why, not just say, no, I don't want to change it, but why are you feeling that way? And that gets to your question exactly about women being nice, about Tessa, the main character, being nice. I mean, Tessa, one of the things I love about Tessa in the book is that she's like a lot of us. She's good. She's a good person. She, just as you say, she's smart and she's sensitive and she's caring. But years ago, she made what really felt like a Faustian bargain, a real deal with the devil. And she's worried that that has come back to haunt her. So she's worried that this danger that she finds herself in, that her book tour is turned into a cross-country cat and mouse chase with Tessa running for her life, just like regular book tour, right?
Right.
She realizes that no matter how genuinely loving she is and how genuinely wonderful she is, the other person in her life or persons in her life don't care. And I think the thing is that we as individuals, and Tessa as an individual, we as individuals are not alone in the world. And our books are about motivation and why people do what they do. So Tessa can have the best motivation in the world, including trying to keep her secret, but that doesn't matter because our books are not only about motivation, but about conflict and what someone wants and how far they'll go to get it. I think about that every day. So Tessa can be nice as pie and lovely as pie, but if somebody else wants her to do something or doesn't want her to be happy, they're the ones that are trying to take control of her life. So I think, we're told as kids, if we be wonderful, if we do the right thing and be good and follow the golden rule, that everything will be fine. But I think one of the things about crime fiction is that we won't be fine. And you were saying something, we've talked a little bit about this before, that I thought was so interesting about when we hear about victims, what people say.
Yes, we were talking earlier about when a woman is a victim of a crime, and I listen to a lot of crime podcasts because it's sort of like doing research for me. And I've always been very, very interested in human behavior, and in particular human criminal behavior, ever since I was a little kid. I can remember reading articles in the San Francisco Examiner about murders when I was really, maybe 8 years old. And I had really sort of laissez-faire parents, it was sort of like, as long as we weren't out robbing banks, that was fine with them, So my parents did not protect me from that kind of stuff. But we were talking about, in a crime podcast, the woman victim is invariably described as exactly the same way, which is, she is pretty and lively and happy, and when she smiles, I can't tell you how many times I've heard, when she enters a room, she lights up the room. And that would never be said about me, and I will tell you that right now. But here's what's really interesting. When I was young, the one thing that my mom, I was brought up by an Italian mother, so maybe that's enough said. But one of the things that my mom always said to me was, be sweet. Always. Always, 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 always. And what she didn't realize is she was doing a couple of things by saying that. She was never saying, be yourself. She was never saying, who you are is good enough. Just go out there and be you. It was always, be sweet. And I remember saying to her one time, or maybe I never said it, maybe I just concluded it, that it was very lucky that I never ran into Ted Bundy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right.
Because if I had been in the park in Issaquah the day that he actually kidnapped and killed 2 women, not 1 but 2, but what he was doing is he was going around, he had a cast on his arm, and he was asking young women if they'd be willing to help him put his surfboard on his car. Now, he was at Lake Sammamish, and I don't know why anybody would think he would have a surfboard there, but that's how he ended up killing 2 people. But I have to answer one. I have to tell you one more thing. This is so amazing. This is a getting your nails done story. So I was getting my nails done one day, and the person doing my nails said the following to me. She said, and she was in her 50s, she's probably older than that maybe, and she said, when I was 16 years old, my family and I went for a picnic one day, and we went to a park, and we'd been swimming because there was a lake there, and I went up and I went into the restroom, and I came out of the restroom, and there was this man there, and he had a cast on his arm. And as soon as she said that, because this was in Washington, that's where I live, and she said he had a cast on his arm, and he asked me if I would help him put his surfboard on top of a car. Oh yeah, and she said, she goes, I was just 16 years old, a little blonde girl with a bikini, but I said to him, no, I can't do that. My family's right over there. And I said to her, my God, how did you know? And her answer was, I have never seen eyes like that before. And then she would have been one of his victims. So it was amazing.
But isn't that is just chilling?
Yeah.
And the idea that you knew what she was, and did she knew who it was? Now, I mean, she had found out later that was her narrow escape.
No,
or
she
did
found
you tell
out.
her?
Well, later, of course, when everything came out about what he had been doing, she realized, oh my God, that was Ted Bundy. But the very next day it was in the newspapers that two women had been taken and killed.
And isn't that why, I mean, isn't that one so interesting thing about crime fiction, about why we write the books that we write in crime fiction, is that every day there are just narrow escapes that we just don't know about. The person that, you know, even when you feel the bus go by, and you can feel the air from the bus, and if you had been 1 inch closer or 1 inch farther away, it would have made a difference. And I think that one of the things that drives crime fiction, and one of the things that reveals character in crime fiction, is the decision-making process that the characters make. You know, a book is all about secrets and obstacles and what will happen, just in this book, what will happen if Tessa's secret is told. And at every turn, when she's faced with danger, she has to make a decision about what to do. Does she do the lovely, wonderful, selfless thing, or does she do the thing that might make her be at risk but saves her family? You know, every decision that someone makes, whether we know it or not, can change our lives. And I think that's what, you know, we both write, I know that you do this too, is that I'm trying to write the most entertaining, the most page-turning, the most riveting, the most surprising, the most realistic, the most, you know, I want you to miss your stop on the MARTA, right? Because you just can't put the book down. And I think decisions, I think when I put a character in a book who's relatable, and you can say, oh, I see why she did that. I see why she did that. That's going to make you care about the person. And when you care about the person, you're going to embrace the story.
Well, yeah, and I think that's the key in all fiction, that the reader keeps reading because the reader cares about the characters. There are really, I think, two kinds of books that people write. One is the book that's plot driven, and with the plot driven book, that's what it's about. It's the plot, the plot, the plot, the plot, the plot, and there's nothing wrong with that. Those make perfect books to read on airplanes because you're just turning the pages because you want to know what is going to happen next. And Jurassic Park, the novel, is a really good example of that. You know, I was reading the book and I kept hoping that the dinosaurs would eat the two obnoxious children. and that was because it was so obvious that Michael Crichton didn't really know how to write children, and they were just horrible, horrible children. But anyway, of course, that didn't keep me from, and I was just reading the book and turning the pages as fast as I could. So that's a plot-driven novel. And I write character-driven novels. And so the characters are determining the plot. I'm not determining the plot. And so I don't know how you do it, Hank, but I write my books sort of in sections in which scenes are causally related. So scene A has to cause another scene to happen somewhere down along the line. But the characters are determining what's going to happen next, even though I am sort of the vehicle for the characters.
They're making the decision, so it's sort of because, and that's what makes a book make sense. I mean, I think it's interesting because we've both written series and standalones. And the idea of writing a series, I mean, it's good because you have your main character and you have the situation that they're in and you know who they are and you know the sidekicks and you know the setting. But the suspense of a series novel can't come from the mortality of the main character because that person is not going to die. So he's going to come back for book 16 and book 17. And so your job in writing a series is to write other characters for whom the stakes are so high that the reader will keep reading the novel and keep caring about the novel, even though they totally know what's not going to happen.
Well, sometimes, but sometimes they get a surprise. But they can be pretty rest assured like that. You know that Thomas Lindley, my main character, is not going to be in a serious traffic accident.
I mean, Kinsey Malone is not. You know, Sue Grafton's Kinsey Malone is not going to die. We know that. But I love the power. My books are standalones. They're not connected to any other books. And the power of a standalone, the difficulty of a standalone is that I had to create Tessa Calloway and her family and her book tour, although that was kind of personal, very personal. Her family and her book tour and her goals and her motivation and the obstacles. And I had to find out as I was writing the book what was going to happen to her because I didn't know. But in a standalone, anybody can be good and turn out to be bad. And anybody can start out bad and turn into being good. And anyone can be lying, and anybody can be guilty, and anybody can die. Anybody can die. And that's why I love standalones, because I'm saying to you readers, watch me now. You will not be able to know what's going to happen next. And that's really a powerful feeling for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was just loving just watching you guys go at it for a little while. That was beautiful. Elizabeth, I do have a question about your research. You said that you watch podcasts, crime podcasts, and in a way that's just your research. But this book is, as far as I can tell, heavily well-researched.
Yeah.
Could you just talk a little bit about your process, about research,
Sure.
how you included what you do?
Sure. So all of my books take place in England, and one took place in England and in Scotland. But when I'm going to set up one of these books, the first thing I do is decide, okay, where do I want this book to take place? And the books could all take place in London, but I would find that really boring because I would be always writing about London, and I like to be able to see more of the sites that there are, SITES, sites where people could die that are out in the countryside. And that is where I begin when I'm going. So I choose a location first, and for example, this book takes place in Cornwall, and it is my third book set in Cornwall. And I begin by choosing, like, what part of Cornwall do I think I want to set this book in, and then I read about that part of Cornwall in advance. And while I'm reading, I'm selecting areas in Cornwall, particular locations in Cornwall, and I frequently don't have the slightest idea what the crime is going to be. I just know that it's going to be set in Cornwall. Most of the time I don't know what the crime is going to be, and I'm relying on the place itself to give me the inspiration. In this particular book, it's about the investigation into the death of a man who is what's called a tin streamer. And tin streaming is the way they got tin from Cornwall for hundreds of years, because tin doesn't exist naturally like a vein of tin. You're never going to see a vein of tin like you might see a vein of gold. What you have to do is you have to extract it from a different kind of stone called cassiterite. That's where tin exists. And to extract it from cassiterite is a long process that starts with gathering those stones or boulders off the beaches where there are, what is the word I'm looking for? It's like where there are cliffs and splits in the cliff. There's a word for that, and it is, yes, thank you. Oh, God. Can you just come live with me? Yeah. I mean, my vocabulary is just like lost so many words, most of them nouns. Yeah, so where there are fissures in the cliff, and the bigger and the taller, the better. Because then what happens is that the stones become dislodged, and then they land on the beach, and the cassiterite is taken from the beach. So I had to learn what this process was. I didn't know I was going to use it in the book until I really got into discovering exactly what is involved in tin streaming. And it is, so I found that out because as I was doing my preliminary research, deciding where am I going to go, I discovered that there was this place called Blue Hills Tin, Blue Hills Tin was the last tin streaming company in Cornwall. And I was lucky enough that when I went there, it was still up and running, so I was able to talk to the tin streamer himself. But the way he had it set up is that you could go in and you could see step by step exactly how they did this work, and you could also see historically how it used to be done before it became mechanized. And I was really fascinated by that process. And I was also fascinated by what you end up with when you do this, and what you end up with. We think of tin, we probably think of tin cans, but that's not what he ended up with. What he ended up with was this beautiful, beautiful silver, because not silver as in the metal silver, but pure tin. And he would then use the pure tin to make decorative objects like a necklace or a candle holder or whatever, small but decorative objects. And I thought that would be really an interesting thing for the reader to experience, to have this whole part of the book where you're in the life of this man who is trying to hold together this business that has been in his family for 300 years. And the conflict that he faces is that his land is really valuable. And there is a group that have come into Cornwall, and they're called Cornwall Eco-Mining, which sort of sounds like a contradiction in terms, but what they are looking for is lithium. And lithium is hugely desirable, needed, wanted all over the planet because of batteries. However, to get lithium, you have to do it in a very, very environmentally hazardous way. And that is to and that's the way it's done in South America, where they have these huge football field pools of salt water. And as the pools slowly water evaporates, from there they get the lithium. But this particular group, and they actually do exist, Cornwall Eco-Mining, it's not up and running yet, but I read about how they were going to do it.
Did you shut them down with your book?
So what they do is they drill down, they drill a borehole in a search for thermal brine water. And thermal brine water exists in a substratum beneath a certain kind of granite. And so what they do is they go in, they do a borehole to see if it is thermal brine water. If it is, they pump it out, they take it to the distillery, for want of a better word. They get the lithium from it, and then they put the water back into the ground.
Only you could make this into a wonderful mystery. I'm listening to you in awe, aren't you? Of like, how do you know this?
This is so high-level nerd happening right now. Like I'm enthralled by it.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
So interesting.
Yeah, so you can see that here's this man who has this piece of property, and this Cornwall Eco-Mining is going around to different landowners and trying to get their mineral rights so they can bore for these thermal pools. But in the case of this one guy, the tin streaming man, they don't want to bore holes on his property. They want the property because they want to build their structures to distill lithium on his property. And the reason for that is that it's very difficult to get permission to build anything in Cornwall for a couple of reasons. First of all, because it's Cornwall, and it's, they don't want to wreck this beautiful county. And the second reason is that the Prince of Wales owns most of Cornwall. And so he's not going to probably say, oh yeah, put up a factory on my pristine land. But what you can do is you can build, you can build on the footprint of other buildings, and that's why they want his land.
See, the joys and glories of research, right? I mean, and at some point, does your brain just go, oh yeah, that all fits together. I can use this and this and this and this.
Yeah.
How does that feel when that happens?
Excuse me. Oh, that wonderful moment of yes.
I love that. I totally love that. I'll tell you that my research is very different for this book than it is for lithium tin streaming mining. But now we know this. Now we'll never not know this. And I welcome it. Thank you. We're going to be great at cocktail parties. Listen to this. Anyway, I was at the idea for All This Could Be Yours was one of those bits of research that I didn't know was research when I was doing it. I was at a bookstore called Poison Pen in South Scottsdale, Arizona. You know it. You've certainly been there 1,000 times. It's sort of a haven for crime fiction writers and readers. And it's sort of the Eagle Eye Books of Arizona is what it is. And I was autographing books there and at a signing. And I signed a book, So Wonderful to See You in Scottsdale. And I signed my name and put the date. And then I handed the reader the book. And I thought, oh, I've just given someone an alibi. Right?
Yeah,
She was at Poison Pen, I was in Poison Pen. We knew the date, we knew the place, so she had a perfect alibi. And I just thought, well, that's kind of cute, that's funny. And then I started thinking about all the things that we write when you sign a book to someone, that we write when we're signing novels. And it'll say, thank you so much for everything, right? And it's very benign. But then you take your book home and say, look, Hank wrote, thank you so much for everything in this. You know what she really meant by that. And then you just make up a whole story about what thank you for everything was. Thank you for a wonderful evening. I don't know anything that you're going to say about that. You could make up a big story, and you could make up something that happened that never happened. And I started thinking about how everything that authors do on book tour is potentially dangerous. We are in a room. I mean, how did you know that we were all going to be here today? You saw it online, you saw the promotion, you saw our websites, you saw our Instagram pages, and we welcome that. We really embrace that you know where we are. On the other hand, you know where we are. You know, when you see a luggage tag, you know, Tessa starts talking about that her name is on her luggage tag on an airplane. You know, that was, why would she do that? I had a day when I was at the airport and I posted on Instagram, here I am at gate D42, and my publicist called and said, what are you doing? You know, saying that. And so all those kinds of things happen in our real lives that you could twist and turn into, I mean, we know authors, not us, that I know of, we know authors that travel with bodyguards. You know them, right? And what you were talking earlier about security and bravery, that there are just some times when, I mean, why do you think they call them fans? It comes from fanatic, you know? And when someone thinks you're their friend, or someone thinks you owe them something, or someone feels that they're, you know, parasocially connected to you, and they require something from you, that can get really ugly. So this book will take you on book tour. The scenes in present day only take place in airports, airplanes, Ubers, hotels, bookstores, and libraries, just like real books, just like real book tour. And I want you to feel what it feels like. The joy and the glory of being in a room with wonderful people like you and readers is unsurpassed. But if you turn the prism and make it be terrifying, it can also be absolutely creepy, dangerous, and worrisome along the way. So the pressure and the stakes are supremely high, not only for our careers, but for the people we're leaving back home.
Right,
Yeah.
Thank you. I have more questions, but I do want to give a chance for you wonderful folks to ask more questions. I will say that if you ever see me posting that I'm at gate 42, because I am not very much on Instagram, it's probably weeks old anyway. So I never post things that happened actually today, mostly because I'm lazy. But I didn't know that it was protecting me all this time, so good. There is a microphone here in the aisle. And if you guys would like to get up and find your way to the microphone and ask questions, we will be very excited to answer them.
Easy, non-controversial questions, not about our deep, dark secrets.
Don't listen to her. Ask the deep, dark secrets.
And it is fun to ask and answer questions, I will tell you that. Except make sure you don't give any spoilers.
Yeah. If you've read the book, don't give any spoilers.
Or if there's something that you want to know about, for example, a character that died, that was an unexpected death, and you want to ask me that question, all you have to say is, there's an unexpected death in one of your books, and I'll know what you mean.
I want to know, not who, but whose books are on your bedside table?
Nice question.
I'm sorry, I didn't... Oh, on my bedside table. Right now I am reading Cutting for Stone by, oh gosh.
Abraham Verghese.
Thank you. Yeah, by Verghese. It's wonderful. He's fabulous. And then I also have like this stack of to-be-read books. I'm sort of a compulsive book buyer. So that's, so that's what I'm reading right now. And I have a whole variety of other books that are to be read next.
It's a problem. It's just really, this book thing is a problem. I know you know this as well, because, and I know you have the same situation. People send us books, and we're like, oh, yeah, this is great. I need to read this. And then we're reading books for blurbs, and I do several shows on Instagram, on Facebook, and on YouTube that are author interviews. So I'm reading, sort of doing homework, reading the novels of those people. So it's great. We want to read a good book and talk to the author? Yes, I do. Right now I'm reading Susie Dent's Guilty by Definition. Do you know this book? The main character is a lexicographer who works at what's supposed to be the Oxford English Dictionary. And it's all about words. It's as clever as anything that you'll ever read. Susie Dent is sort of famous in the UK as do you know her, as a talk show, game show person, sort of a female Richard Osman, just as smart as Richard Osman, just as clever as Richard Osman. You will love this book. Yeah. Guilty by Definition, it's called.
Okay.
And I also just read, in a completely other realm, a book by a woman called Danielle Valentine called Dead Husband Cookbook, The Dead Husband Cookbook, which is sort of Julia Child meets Sweeney Todd. Yeah. and it's like, it's hilarious, as murder is.
Elizabeth, I wanted to share with you that you wrote one of the most psychologically terrifying books I've ever read, and that was What Came Before He Shot Her.
Oh, thank you.
I knew what was going to happen. And I had to stop reading because I couldn't handle what the outcome was going to be.
Did you finish it?
I did.
Oh, good. Because
and the follow-up, yes, both. But my main question is Barbara Havers. How did you come up with her as a character? She is so unique.
Well, it's a very simple explanation. When I decided that I wanted to do British crime novels, my initial character who was going to be solving the crimes was the forensic scientist Simon St. James. And I wrote my first two thoroughly rejected books where he was the sleuth. And then when I got to my third attempt, I thought, well, I've got this Scotland Yard detective, because he was always in the books, so let's just see if he can solve a crime. And that became the book called A Great Deliverance. But once I had him established as a character in my head, and I was going to give him a book, that meant he needed to have a partner, because it's good for to confuse the reader by having the detectives discuss the case. So my main character, Thomas Linley, he's what's called a belted earl, and that means that he has two names. So his name is Thomas Linley, Lord Asherton. I came up with that because I just thought it was so cool that the British could have two names, but we can't. So he's both Linley and he's Asherton, except nobody calls him Asherton anyway. That's beside the point. So he's an earl, so he had to have the accoutrements of earldom. So the family pile in a different part of the country, the type of car, the clothes, the blah 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 blah, all that stuff. And when I was done, I thought, there's a very good chance that the reader is going to really find this guy obnoxious and not like him at all. So I decided what to do would be to prescribe the reader's symptom. And that means that I, as the writer, understand how the reader might very well react. And so I invite them to react that way in advance so they won't react that way. And it's like...
What was that? Just tell me that phrase again, you said?
It's called prescribing the symptom.
Prescribing the symptom.
Yeah, it's like...
I've never heard that.
This is what I used to do as a high school teacher when I was going to hand back tests, and I knew that the kids were not going to be happy with their tests. They were going to just be... And when high school kids get upset about their tests, it's sort of like chaos in the classroom, And so I would start out by going, okay, we all need to prepare ourselves. I need to let you know the news is not good. You're going to be pretty disappointed in your performance, blah, 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 blah. And then I would hand out the papers, and then I'll go, they'd be so relieved because they got, a C instead of the F they were expecting. So that's prescribing the symptom.
This is parenting advice also? Just everybody note? Okay. Yeah.
And so that's what I did with the readers by creating Barbara Havers, who hates Lindley, because in the first book, you meet Barbara Havers first. And then she gets assigned to work with Lindley, and she is not happy about that. She hates his guts, yada, yada, yada. And so by the end, what I was hoping is that the reader, that Lindley would have won over Havers and at the same time win over the readers, so they're thinking, hey, it's not his fault. That he's tall and good looking and rich and an earl. Give the guy a break. So that's how she developed.
My question's a Barbara Havers and Thomas Lindley question too.
Oh, okay.
Barbara Havers, I look for characters that change over time. That's why I like a series. And she's changed over time. She's not maybe not as much as you might want her to, by golly, but she's had her moments where she's changed.
Yeah.
I look for where Thomas has changed, and that's harder to find. And I wonder if you could talk about that.
Well, his change is much more subtle because he has undergone a horrible, horrible circumstance in his life. And he has to, sort of live through that circumstance and come out the other side of it. And so because he has had a huge, huge gap in his life, that has put him in a position where he's much more guarded than he might otherwise be. So his change is, I think, far more subtle than Barbara Havers is. Barbara Havers starts out with this enormous chip on her shoulder, and he's contending with that in her, and he becomes closer to her, which is also a change in him, because just as she has never worked with somebody like him, he has never worked with anybody like her. And so over time we see that they become more comfortable with each other to the extreme that now they sort of joke with each other about their differences. So it's sort of a different kind of change, I think.
We have time for one more question, but Hank, I do want to ask you to also answer the previous question about how your character changes over time.
Yeah, I was listening to you with great fascination about that, because I think in real life, there are two ways that we can change. We can change gradually and intentionally, or we can change sort of precipitously as a result of some event that happens that we have to react to. So we can also change, I'm thinking about this as you ask it, we can also change, as Tessa does, by having us feel that the world is one way, and have us discover through the story that it's another way. So I think that if a character is addicted to cigarettes or something, and it doesn't make any sense that they're going to not be addicted to cigarettes, by book 2. I mean, it's a hard thing to do. But I think a change via a realization in your life and circumstances is a big enough change to hold, is like the best kind of change to hold a novel. Tessa goes into the world of, thinking that her dreams have come true. She's a famous author, and what could be wrong with that? But people call my book a careful what you wish for thriller. And I think sometimes when we wish for something, and that turns out to be not a good wish, then we change considerably, because our whole concept and philosophy changes about what good is and what true is and what justice is. And that's not a box you tick. That's a philosophy that grows.
So we have maybe time for 2 or 3 more minutes. So this will be our last question, and I will remind everyone that there'll be time to sign books, and maybe you can ask your questions one-on-one after that. Yes?
Yes, so my question, so I write myself, but I notice sometimes when I'm writing darker characters that I might be hesitant or I might stop. So I'm kind of wondering, when it comes to exploring suspense, do you have any circumstances where you might think it might be too dark, or how do you kind of venture into the darker realm, exploring the darker parts of human nature and all that?
Well, I sort of don't worry about it. I mean, I've written, I don't worry about it. I just write the best book that I can. And, for example, in the book where I had the serial killer, there are many times when you're in the mind of the serial killer, and what he's doing and why he's doing it. And I literally don't worry about it. And I also don't worry, sometimes I will take a situation that comes out of real life, and and then leap into fiction with it. And I don't worry about how that's going to work out. I just go ahead and do it. Probably the darkest book that I wrote as far as what was going on in the novel was Something to Hide, which was about female genital mutilation. And that's a really, pretty heavy, weighty, dark kind of subject, but I felt that it was something that really needed to be exposed more fully, and because many people don't know that's still going on, and it goes on in England even today, and in the United States as well. So it's dark and unpleasant, but I think part of what it's important to do as a writer is to bring stuff out into the light.
I mean, I agree with you. I think it's so, when I'm writing, I have two things, I think. When I'm writing, and I am making it, and it isn't that I'm making it be darker, it's that it is dark. Right. It is. And so if I'm conscious of anything, my writer brain is thinking, how could it be worse than that? How could I make it worse than that? What would be even worse than that? What would be the worst thing that anything could possibly, what could be the worst thing that could possibly happen to this character? But I think when I'm lucky, on the days that, there are days when I look at what I've written and I think, I don't really remember writing that. How did that get there? And it's because I'm so in the head of the person and so in the reality of the story that I'm not really deciding anything about it. It just is that. And I think that you can't make yourself be in that place, whether that's imagination or the muse or the zone or whatever you want to call it. You just have to be open to it and just see what comes out. And then later look at it and see whether you love it, whether it's right, whether it's good. And you might really surprise yourself with what wonderful stuff comes out when you stop considering, when you stop having that little editor on your shoulder saying, I don't know, is that good? I'm not sure, does that work? Just let go. It's not a test like school where you write your essay and you hand it in, the teacher says A or F, wham, and that's it. You're writing a book. It's a process. See what happens. You may love it, or if you don't love it, you can fix it later, and both of those are wonderful things.
That's a great answer, by the way.
Hank, Elizabeth, thank you guys so very much. We'll turn it over now to Kelly.
Yeah, all I have to say is let's give a big round of applause, a thank you to our authors and moderator.
Could I ask one thing?
Thank you so much for coming. I hope you've enjoyed this festival.
Could I ask one thing?
Sure.
Did any of you take a picture of all of us?
I can do it right now if you'd like.
Because I would love to put it on Instagram. Okay, thank you.
Well, again, thank you so much for attending the book festival and for coming out. And I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. It's been a fabulous day. Go out and get some books signed.